Welcome to the Equipping Leaders Podcast Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, thus a leadership enthusiast.
We're doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, leadership decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show to look at how leadership is all around us. And even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and in the opportunities around us.
Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes. In this episode, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 1, No Mercy, Parts 1 and 2.
As we move into Season 3, they actually did this really fun thing where they had this flashback movie. And so Doc introduces it as this flashback, and it also not only answers some questions, but I think it also sets up, of course, Season 3 for some other things. So we're in Season 3, Episode 1, which is called No Mercy, Parts 1 and 2. And so we're kind of not really forgetting, but essentially we're going back in time to when Murphy still had little baby Lucy with him, when Cassandra was still alive, and that's kind of where we are right now. And right away, we get to meet a character called the Man, who is looking for, he basically has a list and he's looking for these different people. And so he's throughout the whole episode, he's just very clear and adamant that I'm just looking for the people on this list. And so it's a really interesting, I think, adversary for the leaders throughout this episode, because this person is seemingly so logical and just this is what I'm like, if I get this thing, this ends. But, I need this one thing. So what were some of your takeaways from this episode?
So I had a lot. I think, first of all, unrelated to leadership, but important, is the aesthetic of the opening, kind of one of the opening scenes there where the man is on the phone and it's that ultra modern house, but everyone looks like they're sort of dressed like the 50s. So it's like that Walt Disney-esque, what a picture of the future is going to be. Everything I want in my life. But so I wanted to make that clear cut and transparent. Moving on. But what I think is super interesting about the way this episode is set up is we get to understand what the man's goal is, right? So, and that's going to be the conflict that the team is facing. So what I really liked about this, like you said, it's like a flashback movie, a little longer, it is a really cool way now, because what's gonna happen, right? What the adversity that the team bite mark is gonna face. So now looking at Warren's decisions and stuff, she doesn't know that, you do as the viewer. And it's a really interesting setup to me, because Warren makes some great calls that she doesn't even know about as far as setting things up. And so that just kind of overall about the episode, I think that that's really interesting.
Agreed. And so there's this compound and the man goes there. He's looking for a Dr. Harold Teller, who was the founder and CEO of Mercy Sciences, which is what this compound is based around. And really they're he's not here. The man brings evidence that he's no, he is, and he needs to come with me. And then he goes away. But there's a kid that he takes with him, and it's that kid that gets the connection with our team, Warren's team. And so the kid escapes from the man, and the kid is found by 10K, and they kind of brought into this group. They find out more and they decide, hey, they might have some resources we need. Let's go into this compound. So yeah, so okay, so we're there. I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but now we're inside the compound. There's a lot of interesting interactions that start to happen. So do you have any thoughts up to this point?
No, I'm kidding. So I think as they're getting ready, I don't know. I'm gonna step back. Okay, I'm here with you. So while we were talking about them getting the kid and everything, I think before they enter into the compound, I think it's kind of interesting. Warren you can kind of tell isn't necessarily, she's kind of like a baby person, right? She loved Lucy, and everything. But the kid that they find, that 10K finds, kind of pain in the butt, right? Really not talking much, more like crowing like a crow. And she's like, I'll give him food and water, and he doesn't want any of it. And she's kind of getting frustrated because it's a side distraction from what the main mission is, right? And the team is, I don't want to say they're 50-50, but I'm going to take some literary leaps here, right? Like 50% of the team want to help the kid get back. The other people are just like, we'll do whatever Warren wants to do, wants to continue on in the mission. So I thought that was an interesting little snapshot there of like Warren working with that. Then he steals the 10K's rifle and is running away, and it's like this whole big thing. So it's, I look at it as like, it's an ankle biter task to what your daily mission is. And that's one of those, I think that's a very good, it's like normal day-to-day operations, right? In anybody's office or in their job, right? You have the main thing that you want to do, and yet a million other non-important tasks get in the way of that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
But I think I agreed. And I also think that it was interesting too, when they are kind of talking about it and Murphy's like, we have to keep going. And Roberta agrees with him because that is the overarching mission. But Addie brings up a great point too, where she's like, but this is who we are. And I think that that's something too, like in our day-to-day lives, where it's like, but is this part of my role? Is this part of my, not what's in my job description, which I know is important in some industries, but it's like, what is my role? What is the purpose of why I'm here? And does this fit into it? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it does, whereas in this, Addie really believes that it did, she was able to convince Warren, then yeah, then it does. And she was also able to find other things that the team could gain from that in helping out this kid. They had transportation, they potentially had water, they potentially had other things that they could use. So sometimes, yeah, those little side things, you never know what additional skills or resources you can gain from just going off the trail a little bit. You can always get back to the trail. It's not going to derail you forever.
Yeah. So that piece I thought was really interesting. And then once they're in the compound, you know, it's interesting because it's another little town society thing. And so far they don't have a great track record with leaving those places as they found them, right? Most of the time not better. So I think that I don't know if they're cognizant of that yet as a group, but like every time they come to this like humanity holdout and they come in and attempt to help, either they bring trouble with them or trouble finds them there. And so it's like a tread lightly sort of moment. I don't know. I have a thought there. Circle back to me. I'll come back. I'll hit you with it.
Okay. So they're in the compound and they've got Dr. Teller and they've got, Addie and Warren and all them and Doc, I should say, and then another member of Teller's community. And they're talking about this compound. So they know about the man. They know he's coming back for Dr. Teller. We learn a little bit about Dr. Teller and why Mercy Sciences is so important. And so probably why he is important to the man. And that's when they're also now they've come together and Teller's like, here's how we fortify. It's fortified against zombies, probably not people. And then he also mentions that they don't know how to fight. So that's where also Warren sees that opportunity to be like, oh, I could teach you, right? So what I love about that scene is they're all kind of like standing around the map of the compound, is that they're all saying like, here's what I can bring to this group. This is why we could merge for right now. This would be the value for all of us, right? So I thought that was an interesting scene to also see like some of the leadership from the other group chat with Warren and her team.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Does the man give his ultimatum like he'll be out here in whatever he says, 24 hours or something, otherwise I'm coming in to get him? Does he give that in that first interaction, or does he give that in a later interaction?
Yeah, so he has 3 core interactions with the compound. So yeah, the first is just that I'm coming back in 24 hours. Dr. Teller needs to come with me. But then it's when he comes back in a second one, claiming to be checking on the kid that escaped. And that's when he said, that's when everyone else is like, hey, you said you were giving us 24 hours. And he's like, I lied. And so then he's like, bring me Dr. Teller. And that's when we get this very interesting Spartacus moment led by Warren, who says, I'm Dr. Teller. And then Addie says it, Doc says it, other people in the compound say it. And so I thought that was really interesting too, because up till this point, Warren's been teaching them how to fight. Like, she has essentially this transitive authority given to her by Dr. Teller. So now these people all trust her, but then she does something very leadery where she steps up and she's like, okay, yeah, I'll say that that's who I am. So I thought that was an interesting moment there. And then before the man leaves there, I think she has she has a million great lines, but when when the man and Warren are talking and he tells her, don't be a hero. And she says, don't come back. I was like, that's like, she was all like, it's like, you don't just get to set the rules. I'm telling you that what you want is not available for you here. So you're not going to get that either. So I thought that was like, she is just so good at meeting the moment in all these different ways.
Yeah, the man's like interactions too, I think are really interesting because he's just, like, he's not a good guy, right? We can accept that. But like he's putting on a facade that I think a lot of bad leaders do, where he's going through the motions of what you would, he's being very clear cut, right? He is announcing what his goals are, what his requirements are. He's announcing the outcomes, right? What the positives are going to be if that all happens, and what the negatives are going to be if it doesn't take place. And so like, it's this, like, he seems like he's being a very reasonable person, and it's like, oh yeah, we'll just give him doctor, then we're all fine, right? Which one guy for all of us, that's totally reasonable, and he's going to leave us alone. So it's, I think that's kind of, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, that sounds a lot like insert bad leader you had before here, So it's that whole illusion of choice, and the illusion of like being reasonable. So I think that's those are interactions are very interesting to me.
And also the illusion of caring, right?
Yeah.
Back to check on the kid. Oh, this person who I killed, he misunderstood my intentions.
Yeah.
The man said about killing that guy. So yeah, there are people who are like, oh, leaders care. I'm here because I care. So it's like this it wasn't even performative. It was very much him announcing those things, right? And it just being a verbal thing, zero actions to actually follow that up. So yeah. I did like the part when, I liked so many parts in this flashback movie, but when Warren is teaching the people in the compound how to fire weapons, so she's giving them instruction, but it's not just like this technical instruction of doing it. It's also this mindset, which I think good leaders are good at, being clear about what the instructions are. And also, let me talk about like mindset a little bit without getting like super philosophical about it. So I loved like watching her as she was helping those different people. And even the ones who were really scared, probably never held a weapon before, she brought that same energy and really started to make them feel like they were a bunch of badasses.
Yeah, I'm curious, what are your, so when they, like, as they're preparing for the battle and everything, and they're, kind of fortifying the compound and everything, they choose like that common like red color and theme, right? So like as like a rally flag or as like an identity. What are your thoughts on that? Like with the team, right? Like that whole, like for them it's this red, right? Like the building's red, they're gonna be dressed in red, they're painting stuff red. Like that's like, I get from like a military perspective, right? You want to know who are good guys and bad guys. The good guys are in red in this case. But like, what are your thoughts on that from like a team dynamic or corporate, like an identity thing? Like, I know we talk about culture a lot and that kind of thing, but like, where do you stand around the red in, like, what are your viewpoints on that?
Good question. I think it is kind of similar to why people like a sports team, right? And then they wear those sports ball teams colors. Or you have like branded swag from your company or anything like that. I think that there is in some situations, it can really bring people together in a way that other things cannot. And now it's not a solution and it's not a cure for a bad culture, of course. But especially when people need to rally around something and you just need this support. And the other thing too is that it needs to be slightly temporary in the sense that it's not like we're always about the color red. So you don't want it to become like lame like that. But at the same time, I think that using a mascot or a color or something like that can be really good for, especially like, oh, we've got this like battle to fight, we've got this project to finish. Like, yeah, let's do something that those who are involved in it understand what this color is or what this logo is, and it means something to us.
I found I'm glad to hear that, because I found myself in situations more and more now where like branding comes up as being a priority of a lot of like more senior level leaders that I interact with or engage with, about things being, they don't use the term on brand, but essentially they want it to be on brand, right? Like they want this identifiable thing and they want the team to buy into that as well. And it's interesting to me because nobody buys into it, right? It's like fluff, like, oh, it's, no, make it red because all of our stuff is red, right? That's how we know where our work is out there in the world, because it's red. And it's like, or we know it because we made it, so like that helps too. That's that also works. So that I don't know if that's a shift just in my industry or if that's something that people are doing more of, but I kind of felt like, oh, is this like a remote worker thing, right? So like, oh, when I'm out and about at the grocery store, oh, you're red, I'm red, oh, look at us, we're interactive, let's put a photo of us both wearing our red on LinkedIn and get all the company likes. So I don't know, it's a weird thing to me.
Well, I think you're bringing up a really good point too, where sometimes people get so caught up in, is this on brand? Is this the brand? Is this the brand? And it's like, you forget that that brand is made up of people. And that's really where the focus needs to be. If people aren't engaged in it, or if people aren't inspired by it, you're wasting time. Like, yeah, your company should have a brand and that it's like, this is the vision, this is what we stand for. But that's why when it comes to things where it's like a specific color or a specific logo, I say it needs to be like so like temporary and essentially project based, where it's like, maybe as a company, our brand is that we are, we're more informal. It's jeans and t-shirts maybe, or whatever, right? But like that kind of thing where it's like, if you show up in a suit, everybody's like, what's going on? So that doesn't feel like it's part of this.
Are we all getting fired?
Right. And then I think there's like the separate thing that's just like all the marketing stuff, which I honestly, even though this might be controversial to say, internally, do I care? I mean, it's not part of my lane per se. So what I care about is like internally, who are we? What is the brand of the organization? And so that I can match that vibe, mostly for the purpose of appealing to other people in the organization, right? But I don't think that a good brand is like, we use the colors black and yellow, or we use the color red and it is this, like, I don't, pardon me, I don't feel like that is like good long-term stuff, because it's empty without the people behind it.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I just, again, it's weird, like those external drivers as to why people get, like it's a buzzword right now for where I'm at. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. But
Yeah.
Again, sorry, it took us on a tangent, but I thought those were good points.
You're good. And another thing though, I think is that like when I do have a lot of things that are branded for the organization that I work in. And what I like about wearing those things external to my home, whether it's a tote bag or, a jacket or whatever, is that other people get really excited about this industry. And so I love my job. I love what I do. I love my company. And so it's one of those things where if it sparks that joy, it can be a fun, quick connection and conversation with someone without it also then needing for me to adopt it as my own identity. It's like, oh, you like this? Oh, that's so cool. Like, what do you do with this? Oh, great. Okay. And then that's it. But it's not, yeah. So there's different little places where I think it's impactful, but I go back to the people. What are the people doing?
Yeah. Yep. No, and and to me, like, I guess, like, marketing is marketing, right? And there are people that get advanced degrees in that, and there's a whole psychology and a process behind that, and it's a big, right? I think it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. So that's that. It's more like the whole idea of like forcing the corporate, not culture, wrong word, but like forcing the greater ideas of a company on a team level, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that team doesn't, maybe that team does not want to wear red. Maybe that team all has a lot more to rally around with blue, right? Like that's the thing. But yeah, again, I've noticed an uptick of like this sort of pervasive, like toxic counterculture as those things are coming into play, where it's like we're all gonna wear red because that's what we're doing, and at the team level they go internal. They say we're not wearing red. The heck with you, and then it becomes what else can we not do that they are trying to force on us, right? Like we're not going to do our timesheets are supposed to be done by noon. We're not going to sign until 1 because we know they don't need them back till 2, right? So like we're just not going to do it now, and it just, I mean, it's cancerous. You know what I mean? It is amazing how that's been flowing. I don't know if this says great things about my industry, but I should probably. It's a great place to be. I'm super happy. But yeah, it's just like that whole thing, and it's so weird to me. So it's like all of these things that people are trying to force have the opposite effect of what their intended goal was because they're trying to force it onto people. So it's a weird thing.
I agree in part. And I also want to offer like a little bit of a reframe. And that's that I think it's really hard to set a company culture. A lot of people do. Like a lot of people try to set that, right? Because you're told to. In leadership, they're like, you got to set the culture. But I think as individual leaders, we do set the culture. We need to understand what the company vision is and what our mission is and drive towards that. But I'll even go back to like, how does Warren lead and move this team forward? How does Addie do that? Hers is probably a little Venn diagrammy with Warren. But then you have Doc, who's also moving this forward in his completely own way. So I really think that it's leaders who contribute to the culture in a lot of different ways. And I think that it's perfectly fine for each team within an organization to have their own culture and to be protective of that, because each function is so different that it's like, that doesn't work. You're trying to push this over here, and good communication can also help you get to what is the intent of this. Let us figure out how it works for us. But also at the same time, that's when you get people push back, and then people are like, oh, you're pushing back. Well, we pay your paycheck. And it's like, yeah, but what you're trying to push on them doesn't work for that group. And they're right to protect that internal team culture. As long as it's not completely counter to the big organization. I get like, why does it matter? Why does every single person need to wear the same color or be the same person? That's a total institution. And that's also another podcast.
Yeah. Also, the red thing works for them in this episode, though. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
Let's just throw that out there. And I also think you were talking about how Addie leads differently than War, right? Kind of same, but Doc has his own thing. I also think that Doc in this I'm just gonna keep calling it an episode. I know I think they said mini movie, but episode. Um, he kind of really rallies the troops, both literally and figuratively, in this episode in a way that's sort of, um, uh, I feel like he tends to be more of a middle of the road kind of leader, right? He's just trying to not keep the peace, but just try to keep focused on the mission, right? And it has a very calming tone. And he gets very due to the nature of the dude coming up, bringing other weapons and zombies and everything like that. That he gets very energized, and I think that um I think that has like double the power of just like somebody who's always high energy being a little bit more high energy. I think he's always so middle of the road. His even the slightest peak is like has a huge impact, right? Like, and so it's like I was even like, oh, I'll get off the couch and let me go get some zombies or something. So I thought that was a really sort of interesting turn for his character. You know what I mean? Or for him as a leader.
Yeah.
Is was pretty cool.
I like that because in the book Impact Players by Liz Wiseman, she talks about one of the qualities of an impact player is that they can step up into leadership and then they can step back into their other position. And so in this, we have like leading up to this point, we have a couple things that I did want to address and that I did want to ask you about. But basically, Warren goes looking for the man so that he doesn't come back and that she ultimately gets captured. So now she's not there.
Stupid.
And they,
Sorry, go on.
and but the man is also starting to realize that, oh, Warren's the one who started this, I am Dr. Teller, seeing that he could potentially leverage her. And then you're right, like there's this point where he goes to Murphy and Dr. Teller and he says, he's like, Warren is not back yet. And so Murphy has a comment. He's like, we can't do this without Warren. And that's when Doc is just like, he just shuts it down. He's like, none of this bull. And he says, we're going full tilt boogie, just like we talked about. Get to, where to be, right? Or how did he say, get to where you're supposed to be. And so I love that because in that moment, he was like, he knew what probably happened to her. They couldn't go look for her. This person was the person who they were going to get her back with. So he also had this perspective to be like, well, we don't stop because she's not here. And also this is probably how we get her back. And he did, he just got everybody in line. And it was very cool to see him lead a charge in that way.
Yeah, I love that. So going back to Warren going to look for the man. Okay. I am going to slip on my armchair 4-star general hat here, right? Leadership. Got it. Lead from the front. Sometimes you got to do the harder thing first, right? Or do the first thing first, be the first one to do something so that way you can help everyone else get over the bridge, climb up over the wall, something like that. If you are about to go in, to me, that is the same thing as like the due date for this activity or for activity. What am I in college? No. But the due date for like this project is Friday. By the way, I'm taking PTO Thursday, Friday, Monday. Like that is the equivalent of what she did. I'm gonna run off and look. You guys have it all good? Good. I'm gonna go look for the guy, see if we can just prevent this whole thing from happening, right? Like, oh, nope, we've already decided it's gonna happen. Why would you go look for him, right? So that's just like, oh my gosh, I hated it.
I viewed it a different way. I really viewed it as, she was trying to see if she could get ahead of this thing. And she knew that she had the opportunity to do that because everybody else was fine. And we saw it when things started to break out. Addie was outside like, you go there, you go here, you put this there, you put that there. So I really viewed it as she wanted to try this other thing. And because the rest of the team was so stable, she knew that she could go try it.
I can see where you're coming from. I will say on the great slider chart that is right, acceptable versus unacceptable risk. I think I trend more conservative on that than you do. All right, this was a guy coming with zombies who has made threats. This wasn't, in my opinion, like some terrible, you have to pay $5 to wear jeans on Friday now, but it all goes to charity. what charity? Anyway, I will start over. But this wasn't that, right? This is so like that's what I say. It's like in the frame of this situation, even if you have all that trust in the team, that team also has a lot of trust in you that they're going to execute to the best of their ability. But also, if that doesn't go well, the immediate place they're going to look to is where you're standing. And if you're not standing there, I don't think that's fair to them, right? In this situation. So it's like, yeah, I get you. I think everything you said is valid, but that's like where my head is at with it. Is like this was not like a light situation. You took PTO on the due date. That's real. That's a cop out.
I respect where you're coming from. So, okay, I've got a question for you around like leadership decisions here too. So Dr. Teller has these people,
Yep.
zombies that he's keeping alive, these people who are suffering, right? And Murphy can, he can communicate with them telepathically. And so he knows that they're suffering and that they're asking to be mercied. And Dr. Teller goes into this whole thing about like, how they came to be. And that essentially like what he was trying to do was he wasn't sure if they were alive or not. And so he was just trying to like keep it stable essentially. So I'm interested in what you, and he was the CEO, right? Nobody was gonna fight him on that. So did you have any thoughts around that leadership decision?
Also a cop out. I wish you wouldn't have said that they were suffering because I was about to say they're my favorite zombie ish thing. Because they're like glow in the dark mushroom covered people, and it's very Tron meets Lord of the Rings in my opinion. So I like
The
those.
visual spectacle, I will agree.
Yeah. But I think um, as like they say that they don't want to like when Murphy's communicating with them telepathically, and they're like, we don't like we're suffering, right? This isn't the life that we want. And like he obviously he didn't know that, but like I think there's obviously some person. I think his wife is in there too, and CEO. I'm shooting off a lot of stuff that's I'm coming back around. I promise I'll get to the point. But it's like um uh I don't think he was the CEO or the boss of all the people living in that compound, right? Like I don't think those were all former employees of his, right?
We are led to believe that they were at the beginning of the episode.
Oh, were we? God, critical thinking or listening skills, I don't know. Movie comprehension down the tubes.
Well,
Okay.
maybe that's just what I perceived, but go ahead.
Sorry, I've lost all credibility at this point. But anyway, crazy realization. But no, so I guess, but then that would mean to me that they're all of a higher level of scientific understanding, right? If they're working for this biopharmaceutical company type thing, then I don't know. I guess I don't think it's the best call, right? But it's also at the time everyone is like, what are the needs, right? What are the needs of the group? The needs of the group are safety, food, place to sleep, not get eaten by zombies. He's providing all of that. He's trying to keep these zombo mushroom people alive. I guess I don't know. I guess I didn't think about it like that. I just sort of accepted it that he was going to keep them alive, research or otherwise. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it goes to show that like as leaders, we make the best decision with what we know. He didn't know they were suffering. He wasn't sure if they were alive or dead. So he's like, I'm going to do what I can to keep them alive and comfortable. And, he didn't know anything else. So I think sometimes as leaders, we may have the best intentions and we're making a decision based on the information that we have, and we don't have any other information, and there's nothing we can do about that, right? So then later, as we find out more information, obviously we change how we're meeting each situation. But I think it just goes to show that like, yeah, he was the CEO and founder of this Mercy Sciences place. And, then this happened with the people who worked there and, wanting to just keep them comfortable. he did what he thought was the right thing. Now, was there probably some emotion in there too? Because one of those people was his wife? Yeah, probably. But he didn't just keep her, he kept all of them. And so I think that that was another really interesting thing too, where it's like, sometimes you're just doing the best that you can. But then you need an outside perspective, right? He needed Murphy's perspective to understand that, like, oh, the way that I'm doing this isn't maybe the best way. So as leaders, to also be like, I'm doing this based on this, based on the information I had, I think it's the best thing. And somebody else offers you new information, we have to be open to that. Whether we agree with it or not, we have to be open to what could some other possibilities be.
Yeah, because that's the other thing too, is like when they're like kind of losing the battle, and he's he's like, hey, let me just go with the man, right? Like enough people have died, right? Like it's not worth it. And then more of them are kind of like, no, like don't let those people have died in vain. So that was, I think that was, I would have said the same thing that he did, right? I probably would have made the same. I would have probably done the same thing that he would have done from the beginning, which is I would have went with the man from the get-go, but just because, right? Like, okay, let's let these people be safe and good, and I'll come with you, and that's no problem, right? Like that, and that's just like being a good human, I think. So, but yeah, it's a really interesting thing, because like all those people, like I've never been in a situation where like other individuals were willing to like sacrifice their life for me as an individual. Hope I'm never in that sort of situation either, by the way. But like I can't imagine the amount of like pressure and stress that has, right, on a leader. And so I've never provided payroll to someone, right? Like I've never had somebody that I am directly responsible for providing them with a salary, and like that they're living off that, feeding their family. And it's a transactional relationship. We know that, but at the same time, part of that transactional relationship is also they are providing with me that service for pay, but also in faith and trust that I'm going to keep that paycheck stable or growing or consistent, however you want to look at it. So I think that's a lot of pressure, I think. And I don't, that's an interesting sort of situation, because then saying I'll just go with him, now it's a cop out, right? Because you're letting go of your side of the deal under this veiled thing of like, oh, I'm gonna sacrifice myself for all of you. No, you're not. You know what I mean? You're taking the cop out. So.
Mm. So let's go back to Doc when the man.
Oh, no thoughts on that? Cool. Opened up my heart.
I already shared my thoughts. You know what, Corey? I really
Yep.
like your thoughts. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. They were good thoughts.
Just needed the validation. Thank you. Go on. Moving on. Sorry.
So moving back over to Doc. So now the man comes back and he essentially has this truck that they start to back up. They don't know what's in this truck. But Doc makes a decision for everybody where he's like, oh, fall back. Like just, he doesn't say the "oop" part, but he's definitely still assessing the situation without Warren there and deciding like, what do we need to be able to keep fighting? And he's like, since we don't know what this next threat is, essentially we need to just like fortify, let's step back for just a second, but still pay attention because we have this incoming challenge. But then they find out that they have some of these. Well, I won't go into the next thing yet. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that it's something I do a lot too, right? Like I said, most of where I work is like within a more of a like an agile focused management style or task management style. So when if a truck was backing up towards us, that's something like, especially in the sprint planning, probably would commit to less in that sprint planning because we're not sure what's in that truck. So we're going to be a little bit more conservative about the work that we know we have, because we're not sure about that work that's coming down the pipe. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really smart, wise decision that Doc made.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. You don't know what that next work is, so let's lean out a little bit like
Yep.
lean, like make whatever our projects are more lean right now so that we can meet whatever this big thing is. So yeah, good example.
But yeah, no, I like that. And then what ends up being in that truck, right, is uh are you ready to go into that?
Yep,
Yeah, so that is, I think that is a task. So those are I think they said mercy proof, I think is what Doc said.
yep, they're mercy proofed.
Yeah, mercy proofed zombies, which right now the process for which the team has always used of mercying zombies, not applicable. Brand new challenge. Um, and how do we face that, right? How do we react to that? And I think that that's really interesting too, because they sort of try what they've always tried a little bit at first, and then it's sort of like this, there was no single voice saying do this instead, and there was a bit of chaos there, and then they resolve it, right, a little bit. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing, because it was kind of like that panic of, this is different than what we were expecting. And boy, can I sympathize with that.
Well, and I think right before this piece happened, they get Warren back. She manages to escape from the other situation she was in, take out some of the man's team, and now she's back with the team. And so I think that now this completely new adversary or challenge that the team had, now they also had Warren back to help them go through that. So they were able to go through it a bit more confidently, even though they were already doing great. But now it was like they had her back. So there was also that, like, I'm not concerned about that person's safety anymore. They're right there. The person is back with us. So I think that that also helped them meet the moment a little bit better. But yeah, when they, I agree. I think that, yeah, they did all that really well.
Yeah, so I think what the other thing that's like really interesting about this whole thing was, and it was like a little earlier, I think, on in the episode, but I think we talked about this maybe a few episodes ago. We're talking about, like, humans kind of like, you just have to trust other humans. And when they couldn't find when they were I think it was Warren was back with Red, is her name, and 10K, and are we calling him 5K? Whatever, 5K, right? The kid, um, are they're running back. They Warren and Red got ahead. Red turns around, like, "Where's 5K? Where's 10K? Where's that?" Warren's like, "They're together. It's fine. Let's go." Red was like very emotionally attached to or involved with 5K, and Warren, right, kind of exudes that like leadership and trust. I'm going to take you at your word, right? Also, right, that very brief interactions that she had with 10K, trust that he's like a good person to be with, and they move on. And I just thought that that was like a really little mini, but like really interesting exchange of like that authenticity as a leader, that authenticity as a person, and what that can really get you, right? Sometimes you don't need the sales pitch or the data and the elevator speech and that. You just say, "Hey, we got this. It's good to go," and that's good enough. And so I think that, because it's authentic, and confident, and I thought that was pretty neat.
Well, and up till then, they'd all proven their competence. I
Yes,
should
yeah,
say, like Warren and 10K, like they had this track record of proven competence. So yeah, but you're right. It's like then in that moment, it was able to be like, okay, I believe that what you say it is, and that's it. And so, yeah, absolutely. But I know we've talked about the distinctions of trust before, with Charles Feltman, and that's that whole just like, do they care? Are they competent? Are they sincere? Are they reliable? That's what I need to know about someone else. That's what we're always assessing, subconsciously or consciously, when we're interacting with another person. And so they had established multiple instances of all four of those, Warren and 10K, so that then when these moments came up, boom, there was trust, there was authenticity, there was a lot there that had been built in that relationship.
yeah, yes. So all of that. I don't know, where do you want to go next?
Those were all of the main notes I had. I will just probably close it out. Did you have more thoughts?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's just a longer episode, so I'm not
It
sure.
is, yeah.
Yeah. So, but because the only other thing was, I guess, sort of at the end there, right? Great like emotional communication. As far as like mercying the mushroom zombie people. I thought that that was, like again, showing empathy and compassion, understand that something's difficult, taking that time, even though time was something they didn't really have. They understood the importance of like that sacrifice of time was more important for that person than the mission, than the fight, than anything like that. So I thought that was really cool. I also, this was interesting is like, again, I know you're kind of you're a well-known Murphy sympathizer. That's everywhere now at this point. Well known. Got to be on your wiki page. But um, I tend to be more critical of Warren again as the armchair leader. It's a little bit easier to. At the end of that, when the helicopter's flying away with that Connex box underneath of it, right? It's like a Black Hawk helicopter, something like that. All of this technology was supposed not be dead, but like these are resources, like big, big, big resources that the team has never seen or interacted with, right? The last time that they were going to see a helicopter on the roof with that general, right? It was a hunk of junk type thing. So clearly, now that they've interacted with the dude, they interacted with the cartels that had some technology, but nothing of that scale. And they're starting to talk about this spaceship things at Zona. Like I think Warren, and I'm implying, right, as a former military person, should understand like that Black Hawk helicopter doesn't just fly from nowhere. You know what I mean? Like that's like there's people, like there's resource you have to know how to do. You don't just push a button. Like, and I don't think the team ever really takes the time to talk about like what these new threats are, that they're not like these homegrown like mom and pop with a shotgun type things anymore. This is like major. The dude is clearly, or the man, excuse me, is clearly part of a much larger organization. And like in my opinion, that should take a reassessment of who's still like a part of this mission or not, right? Because that's a whole new threat than what they're used to.
Interesting. I can see that. I also think that there's sometimes a time when it's like, oh, that's not my lane. Like there are there are a million different ways to get to this thing. Like she said in that day one episode, I move vehicles, right? Like that's what I do.
That's a fair point.
And so there's that piece. So yeah, there's a million different ways I think to do different jobs and different roles and even different projects. But sometimes it's like, oh, it would be great if we had those resources. We don't. So how do we do it with what we have? But that is a great point that it's like, that you brought up, that it's like, yeah, there are all these other things out there that would make their jobs easier, but that are also things that threaten how they get to their end goal. So they're like, yeah, there needs to be an awareness, but there's also that piece where it's like, but that's not how we do it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's a great point. I guess the way I meant it's not like it would be great if we had that resource. It was like we're about to go up against that resource. And I guess the way I look at it is, if I have a team that's working really well, doing task A, if task B is the next task, if they don't know anything about task B and I'm just going to throw them at it because like we've done well with all the task A stuff, it's like if they're really good at making tea and the next thing is making coffee and they've never made coffee before, is it fair to just be like, oh, they're so good at tea, coffee's almost the same, right? Hot water and some stuff added into it. We'll just go into it. Like I guess that's the thing to me. It's like, I feel like the mission is changing drastically at this point. You know what I mean? Again, I realize this is a flashback, but it's like, things are getting more complicated. So.
And they will continue to get more complicated.